Hi folks, how are you doing? In the 7th round of the Tashkent FIDE Grand Prix we had two decisive results and a couple of interesting games. Unfortunately there were some other uneventful draws, but the game we're gonna see here was quite interesting. I think it was instructive. At first it is not fireworks at all, but there are some positional concepts and some instructive maneuvers in the middle game and in the end game which are, I'm sure you'll like. We're talking about the game. Caruana was playing with white pieces, Fabiano Caruana, and Boris Gelfand from Israel was playing as black today. We had Caruana playing 1d4. These days Fabiano is playing both e4 and d4, although I think, and this is my personal opinion, he is much more comfortable playing Ruy Lopez and Sicilians, both with black and especially with white, as this has been his opening all his life. But now he plays also d4, not to be very easily caught in opening, so he wants to expand his opening repertoire, which is not bad of course. Knight f6, c4 and e6. A slight surprise I think, because Gelfand has been using the Grunfeld as his main weapon against Queen's pawn since his match in Moscow with Anand a couple of years ago, I think. So a slight surprise I think, willing to go for the Nimzo-Indian, so Caruana just allows it. Knight c3, bishop b4. We have the queen c2, classical or Capablanca variation of the queen of the Nimzo-Indian, sorry. White is willing to spend time with his queen in order not to double pawns on the c file, and as you can see with these little cute green arrows, black has lots of very valid options here to castle, to play d5, c5, even knight c6, d6, b6 is a very popular move. So d5 was played here, transposing into kind of a queen's gambit, in which black argues that the queen isn't that well placed on c2. C takes was played, and once again black has a wide option here. All three captures are theoretical and very valid for black, and pawn takes is what Gelfand plays in this occasion. Bishop to g5, h6, bishop takes, queen takes, simplifying the position, just getting out of the opening. Now d4 must be protected very naturally. e3 was played, black castles, a3, asking explanations to this bishop on b4, bishop f5, bishop d3, bishop check, pawn takes, bishop takes, queen takes, so no brainer till here. Still very early in the game, but we already have almost an end game, which could be very, could seem very quiet, very not that much of a thing, but as you can see already in the queen side we have some open lines, some possibilities of central tension with the pawn, so we're gonna see some interesting middle game / end game. c5, the beginning of the interesting and instructive part of the game. Gelfand strikes back into the center with his c pawn. Knight to e2, supporting the d4 pawn. Now note that on f3 the knight wouldn't be doing that much. Now white is keeping his f pawn free in order to advance it if he is willing so. And similarly black puts his knight on d7, not on c6, supporting his c5 pawn and connecting rooks. White castles, queen to c6, going for the open c file. We're gonna see the queen side is going to be the battleground of this game. a4, very interesting. At some point avoiding black from playing b5, this could be an idea I guess. So white is controlling it with the pawn, with the queen, and this is kind of a minority attack I guess. If white could get this pawn to the 6th rank, create some weaknesses here and then attack them with the rooks, it could be some initiative, some activity. Rook fc8, rook fb1. We have a tense situation on the queen side, open files. White is going with the rook to the open b file. b7 is a obvious target right so far, and black is putting his pieces on the c file, queen and rook, the pile that is going to be open sooner or later, so he's focusing there. Now rook c7, very interesting move, very logical. I mean, you're going to double rooks on the important c file, and the rook is doing the extra extra job of protecting b7. a5, Caruana keeps pushing. Rook ac8, completely controlling the c file. That file is sooner or later going to be open, so really good stuff by Gelfand, controlling this c file, keeping everything together, holding it together. h3, just giving extra room for the king. Position is basically balanced and equal, but with lots of tension, with all these pawns in the center, the open files for the rook, so potential for things to be happening. Now this is Gelfand's plan now, knight to f6, trying to go to the e4 important square. It could be a nice looking knight on e4 if he gets there in safe conditions, so not a bad idea. Now that c5 is covered, the knight is not needed on d7 that much, so it's relocated to f6, trying to go to e4. Knight g3, Caruana tries to make that difficult, and queen e6, insisting now on putting the knight on e4, but this is giving white some tiny initiative with the certainly not natural to me, but very logical move, d takes c5. It may seem that white is spoiling his pawn structure, creating weaknesses, and it doesn't seem that he's going to keep his pawn, but in fact white is playing with tactical ideas, like if black takes with the rook back on c5 immediately, well, b7 of course would be hanging, so he's just saying, well, I can take a pawn so far, you can't recapture immediately, and see what you are gonna do. Well, Gelfand here came here for knight e4, so he plays it. Knights are exchanged, pawn takes, and Caruana goes queen d6, offering a queen exchange, which of course Gelfand is not going to accept, which, I mean, after this rook d7, if not lost, this is extremely ugly for black, so no necessity to go for this very ugly and passive and bad position for black, of course. So after queen d6, the queen must be moved somewhere if you're not going to exchange it, and Boris Gelfand chose to go to f5, where he keeps putting pressure on the c5 pawn in order to recapture it. But now another interesting move. Caruana keeps highlighting that not only he has weak pawns, he has won a pawn, just remember he's up a pawn temporarily, but he highlights that black has also weak pawns, and he plays rook a4. Now both e5 and b7 are still protected, but under attack, under the attack of white rook, so it's not that easy for black so far to recover his pawn, and that is making white's position, Caruana's position, better here. Not that much, should be holdable, but of course you're up a pawn, he doesn't have that much of a coordination, but his rooks are active and are attacking a couple of interesting squares. Still, rook takes c5 was played here. Well, Caruana takes on b7, and here we reach a critical position in the game. The rook on c5, Gelfand's black rook on c5 has two possible pawns to take, the one on a5, the one on c3, and unfortunately for Gelfand's fans, it seems he took the wrong pawn here. He went for the one on the a file, he takes on a5, and the engine is saying that it was much better for Boris Gelfand to take on c3, and let's try to see why. Well, the most obvious move, rook takes a7, isn't working at all for white, as black is very active. Rook c1 check, king must go to h2, and now f2 falls, queen takes f2, and this is even better for black. I mean, white's king is looking really bad. there, although he won a pawn on a7, but it's not mattering too much as white king is really feeling miserable, so this was not an option. Well, what else instead? After rook takes c3, it suggested for white to go for this endgame, queenless endgame, rook endgame with queen f4, queen takes, e takes, where the material is equal so far and basically should be all as drawish, I guess, holdable. You know, rook endgames are tend to be drawish, and in this one certainly it looks like black has enough to draw. So, well, of course, Gelfand should have seen this, must have seen this, and we're gonna see he played rook takes e5. The rooks were exchanged here, and most probably he overlooked the following move by Fabiano Caruana, a really strong move. You know, the position seems calm, really drawish. Probably this is what Gelfand was hoping for, but unfortunately for him, Caruana has a really nice move here, taking advantage of tactical ideas. He takes on f7 with the rook. This rook was on b7. He takes on f7, temporarily sacrificing a rook, and of course if king takes f7, he would go to d7, recovering the rook, taking on c8. This would basically happen if it was to be taken on f7. Now king can go to g6, for instance, queen takes c8, and white is up a pawn. More active queen, much more active queen, much safer king. Black's king is not that well placed, and probably this is already winning for white. I mean, technique must be required here, but certainly looks very pleasant for white, this endgame. So one can understand that Gelfand was shocked at this point, having missed or misassessed this rook takes f7 move. He didn't take on f7, he plays queen takes c3, and after rook takes a7, Caruana gets a very pleasant advantage based on this tactical weakness of the black king and the activity of his rook on the 7th and his very active queen. Apart from that, of course, he's up a pawn, and well, this makes the endgame extremely unpleasant and ugly for black. He plays king h8. Well, starting from here, the position is getting worse and worse. Well, Gelfand just tries to avoid being checked here, tries to avoid being falling in tactical forks and get some activity, but it's very complicated here. King h8 was played, and now rook f7, which I guess the idea is to just fortify your position, cement the f2 pawn, which could be sometimes weak, and also could have the idea of going rook f4 and attack the e4 pawn, which is basically the weakness of the other great weakness of black here, apart from the king. e4 is what white would try to siege and win. I mean, if that e4 pawn falls, the game is over. It's 4 against 2, so no brainer there. Rook e8, Gelfand defends it, and g4. The way to advance here, the way to make progress is, it seems, to push your pawns and create much more weaknesses on the king side, making this black king really unsafe. King h7 was played, now queen d7. Note that g7 is always protected by the king and the queen on c3, so really not a threat of taking on g7, but these light squares, these checks are going to be important, that we're going to see. Rook b8, and now queen f5 check, king g8. Well, white still cannot take on e4, the rook is hanging. What would do? Move the rook to the a7 square. Queen b2 was played, but just queen takes e4. Nothing, not that much Gelfand can do here. He tries rook f8, attacks f2 in case Caruana would fall asleep here. He can take on f2 with check, but no way. First the check from d5 with the king, queen, king to h7, and now rook to f7. offering a rook exchange, protecting f2, no counterplay for black. White is already two very healthy pawns up, very unsafe king for black, which means game is over. Boris Gelfand resigned at this point, and Caruana wins his game of today, recovering some of the points he was losing in this tournament, which certainly hasn't been very satisfying for him so far. Thanks for watching.